Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's great to see a nice attendance, first one back. So, for those of you who haven't been before, this is the Sussex Azure User Group. I'm Jack. I work at Microsoft, and this is Ryan.
Hello, I work at Microsoft as well. We're in slightly different roles. Mine's more kind of commercial, hybrid, technical. Jack's a techie guru, so we commandeered him to do a talk on what he does best, which is Azure Bicep, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think just a bit of a disclaimer. Obviously, first of all, we have to put these things right. What we're talking about tonight is our own opinions. Everything we say in this room is our own opinions. So for those of you who know me and deal with me in a professional capacity, don't come back to me and say, "Hey, you talked about this last night, and this is all Microsoft's opinion." I will deny everything. Obviously,
I tried to do this thing and it's broken. Can you fix it?
Yes, absolutely. So it's all of our own opinions, and the same goes for you guys, right? Feel free to ask any questions, right? It's a completely open forum. There is nobody going to hold you to anything you say tonight, especially after a few beers. I think this is really important for us as well, right? We're a strong believer in our diversity charter, right? Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your age is, what your gender is, anything like that. If at any point you feel uncomfortable with this user group, pull myself or Ryan to a side, email us afterwards, whatever. We want to know about it. This is a safe place for you guys. If you don't feel comfortable, we want to know about it, and we'll make sure that that's dealt with so you can carry on enjoying it and nobody else ruins that for you. So yeah, please do keep that in mind. So tonight, I think firstly, welcome back. What is it, first one since January 2020?
It's been a couple of years, and if it's your first time in person or you've caught any of our kind of virtual content that we've been pushing out over the last couple of years of pandemic madness, welcome, and thanks for coming along. We're going to try and do more of these in-person events again. Not sure the frequency yet, depending on when we can get speakers and when we can get space and time and everything else. But yeah, thanks for coming. And what's it about? So basically, this is a community that Jack and I have tried to put together over the last couple of years. Purely because there's a lot of these kind of user groups in the London area, but hardly anything in this local area in the southeast of Sussex. So we thought we'd step up to the plate and do it. This is what it looked like before, if you've not seen it before. So we were previously downstairs. This building's been all rejigged in.
So imagine where that table is. There was a set of stairs. So if you see the stairs in these photos, like down where Ryan is, that was there. So this is the upstairs. If you never came up here, this is what it looked like. Skippers obviously had some changes. We had some hard times during COVID, and obviously we've had to make use of the space and reduce size. But it's great to the venue still here and still support us as well. So big thanks to the Skiff. But yeah, this is what it used to look like, and hopefully we can get back to these sort of sizes. And as you see, we've got space for plenty more. To tell your friends, bring them along. And if we need more space, then I'll be chatting to my good friend Steve over here. You can sure tell me where we've got some more space to come and fill up and get some more places here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in talking of the next meetup, Ryan, I think we put some thoughts into this earlier, right?
Yeah. So I want to just get across that although Jack's doing a talk tonight, it'd be great to have other people do talks, and we've invited people in the past from Microsoft or partners or vendors or whatever. But if you've got an idea, it doesn't have to be just like a particular technology or focused on a particular product. It could be you've done a project for a customer, or you've done something in your job that's cool and you'd like to share it. So whether it's a data center migration, or you deployed Cosmos DP and it went completely wrong and you had to raise a support ticket and you found a bug and this is how you got through it. Those kind of things I think are beneficial for everyone because it helps us all learn together, and nuances and products as they evolve and things like that is always good to share. So if you've got an idea, let us know. It'd be great to have somebody else speak and just talk us through it. One thing that we did do way back when, and I think, Nick will remember this, we did like an open mic night for IT fails. So it doesn't have to be just those kind of things. It was just sharing stories of things that either you've done wrong in your IT career or that other people have done wrong. It's completely up for debate. So if you think you've got something that you think other people will be interested in sharing, just let us know.
Yeah, and as we said, right, it's a platform for you, right? Feel like if you want to get new into talking or starting that podcasting or do a bit more social work that's quite popular, this is a platform for you. I know there's a few of you in the room who do have blogs and podcasts and bits like that. Like if you want to take it to that next level and start public speaking, this is a safe space to do it. Nice small audience, friendly crowd. Yeah. Please feel free to abuse it, right? We're here for you.
You won't be judged.
No, definitely not. Have you seen the quality of our presentations? And I think this is important to call out as well. So obviously, we've been away for 2 years, and we haven't been quiet in the meantime. I think we've been quiet this year. I think that's fair to say. We haven't really done anything sort of since I don't know,
I
January.
think we've done two or
three
this year. We did one actually in the meeting room over there, which was two blokes trying to figure out how video indexer works, and you know, it was a first time trying to play with something. We thought we'd video it, but apart from that, it's been mainly either event roundups, so Ignite, Build, all those kind of things, and also specific product stuff. But yeah, that stuff might kind of cool off a little bit as we start to put more effort into this in-person stuff. But
absolutely, and I think you'll probably see some cameras around tonight, right? And obviously, at any point, if anybody doesn't want to be recorded and isn't happy with that, please let us know afterwards. We'll edit that out, or we'll have a discussion. But obviously, it's mainly on us, on the back of your head, so nobody will know you're here if you're trying to hide from the wife. But it's going to be up on YouTube later tonight as well, right? So hopefully, by the end of the week, Ryan's got some ideas to do, so I won't put him on the spot right now, but later in the week, so that other people can get some benefits out of this as well, and you can come back to it and share it around, and hopefully say to other people like, hey, look, go and watch what it's like. It's not a scary thing. Come along, it's very informal. Podcast may calm down, but it's a platform for you. If you want to come on and do a talk with us and have a chat about something, and it has to be that every month or an in-person event, let us know. Reach out to us. We're always up for doing these.
We'll probably make these kind of in-person things into podcasts. So this will be a Azure Bicep 101 thing that will be kind of condensed down. So,
but yeah, stay tuned. Lots of stuff on there, and we'll keep plugging it. So,
right, I'm going to go and exit stage left and
keep an eye out for the pizza. Absolutely. All right. So hopefully this is the clickbait that you all came to attend tonight. So Bicep. And no, it's not a muscle show, as some people were chatting in our group chat this afternoon. It's really, we want to go, what is it, why should you use it, and just a bit of a sort of a 101 on Bicep, really. If you've not heard of it, then you should, by the end of tonight, hopefully have a good understanding of what it is. If any of you are attending a DevOps forum presentation in about a week, this content is going to be pretty much the same. You're on my guinea pigs, right? So if you do attend, this is my content I built it today. I was like, hey, it's a solve two birds with one stone. So this is me. So as I said, I work at Microsoft, one of our senior cloud solutions architects. I work away from the field, so I work in our customer architecture and engineering team. So we're like the team that when big problems come along, so I know some of you in the room have heard of Azure Landing Zones or the AVD Accelerator or the AVS Accelerator. That's what my team creates. So I'm the technical lead for Azure Landing Zones. I look after all things related to that, so you'll see me around all of those repos, and then we get involved on big escalations and stuff like that. When stuff goes wrong, they call us in and we learn from it and then provide that guidance to the rest of the field so that everybody can benefit from it and plug those gaps. I was a former MVP. I think I'm the shortest ever MVP in existence. I got awarded in March 2020 and I started at Microsoft in April. So I lost that pretty quickly. But still a great accolade to have, and still got the trophy, which is great. And you can find me at all of those places below, should you want to, and stay in touch. So I think before we get into Bicep, it's important to understand what ARM is first. So who's heard of ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager? Yeah, good, familiar, that's good stuff. So Azure Resource Manager is like the beating heart of Azure, right? Everything you do with it, whether it's interacted by the portal, ARM templates, Terraform, Bicep, it all goes through Azure Resource Manager. As you can see, authentication is sort of shown as disconnected and tied to the left. It's actually part of Azure Resource Manager, and I've got another diagram that will go in that in a second. But as you can see, no matter what you're interacting with Azure from, it all goes through Azure Resource Manager, right? It's the single entry point. If you've ever seen the URL of management.azure.com for like REST API calls and stuff like that, that is ARM. That is exactly what it is. It's globally resilient, as you hope, right? So it uses availability zones and all of those things where they're available inside of Azure. And it's one of those services that you don't have to configure, don't have to play with. It's there for you, provided for you as a service, and obviously when there's outages, which are few and far between, touch wood, that you obviously don't have to worry about those things. It's something that we look after for you, and it's the way you interact. This is a bit of a different diagram showing a very similar thing, right? So this layered cake of Azure, and we've really broken down ARM here on the left-hand side into its bits and pieces that we've wrapped it in, right? So we've got this front end, which is Azure Front Door, surprise, we use our own products. And inside of the ARM service, we've got all of these things that go on. So, activity logs, the logs, the deployment engine. So when you submit an ARM template, how things get orchestrated and spat out at the right time, that all is part of it. Policy enforcement, the one in the middle, which is the most important one for me. So no matter if you're applying Azure policies to say deny certain regions that can be deployed to, or storage accounts got to have public endpoints disabled and all that stuff, it is buried in the heart of Azure Resource Manager, right? Nobody can avoid it, nobody can get around it. It doesn't matter whether they use Terraform, whether they use the portal, whether they use PowerShell. They can't avoid it because there's only one way into Azure and one way through it, and you have to go through this engine. And then once you've got through all of these things and we're like, yeah, that looks good and we can deploy this, you then get thrown off to something we call the RPs, or the resource providers, which is your individual services. So, when you see like Microsoft.network or Microsoft.compute or Microsoft.web, these are all our individual products that live beneath it, our resource providers, where your deployment commands are then passed to, and they actually provision your services. So that will create your VM, that will create your storage account. It's not actually ARM that does it. Think as ARM as like the puppet master, right? It checks everything's all good, checks you like you got your ID and you're allowed in, checks you're compliant with all your policies, and then goes, cool, in you go. And then you've got to pay the person at the club to get into the bar. The RP is that person that you're paying and will actually deliver you the service, right? It's a really good way of thinking about it. So when we're talking about infrastructure as code, there's really two approaches, right? There's declarative and imperative. Anybody heard these terms before? Yeah? Cool. So when we're thinking declarative, we're like, make it look like this. I don't care how you get there, right? I'm declaring what I want it to look like at the end. So I'm saying I want a virtual network with 3 subnets and I want this VM to be in that subnet. You aren't telling us how you want that. You aren't telling Microsoft how you want that to be deployed in which steps. You're just saying this is what I want at the end. You work out the rest, right? And then we've got the imperative motion. So if any of you are using PowerShell or Azure CLI or maybe some of our SDKs, it's more imperative. You have to work out that logic, right? You have to go, deploy the VNet, then put the subnets in it, and then deploy the VM, but also you need to put the disk in, and then you need to put it here, right? You're working out that logic, and you're handling all those errors and that catching sort of bits and pieces. Obviously, some of the tools do help you along the way, like PowerShell is pretty useful and CLI is pretty useful, but we want to focus on this declarative state, right? Why do we want to worry about all this logic and thinking about how to get there? And we can just say, this is what I want it to look like. I don't care how we get there, just give me what I want. And the reason we say why declarative is, starting to dive into this, when we do a declarative deployment, it's a single ARM deployment, right? You think back to that layer cake deployment, there was that deployment engine in ARM. That is what we're handing off this deployment to. That then takes that file and goes, cool, I've seen what you want, I've seen what we need here, I'll work out the dependencies. You can influence those dependencies as well, because we don't always get it right and it's not always perfect, I think it's fair to say. But then it's one thing to deploy, it's one command to kick off that ARM template or Bicep deployment. Whereas if you're using something like PowerShell or CLI, you're making those individual put calls, right? So you're hammering all the RPs, and actually you bypass ARM. Apart from the authentication and policy enforcement, you bypass ARM. The deployment engine doesn't even know you exist at that stage. It goes straight to the RP once you're authenticated and you've done your policy parsing. So by using Bicep, you're reducing the amount of, you're offloading all that logic. If any of you use Terraform in the room, Terraform's technically imperative, right? Because it's not declarative. It's declarative in its language, but the deployment engine and the declarativeness is the Terraform executable on your machine, or the runner, not ARM. At that stage, all you're doing, if you look at actually the underlying Go SDK that it uses, Terraform, it's just hammering all the individual RPs and the resource providers. Like, that's what it's doing. Obviously, through ARM for authentication and policy, but it doesn't actually do an ARM deployment and deliver any of those things. It's very much a singular imperative deployment. So, that's where that deployment engine, you can think about it, Terraform handles that dependency stuff, not Azure. So, I've talked a lot about the background of hopefully setting this up. So Bicep. Who's ever written an ARM template? Who regrets writing an ARM template? Right? They are JSON documents, right? And ARM is all JSON based, and that's the way it will remain and always will be. So ARM isn't going anywhere. Third statement, right? Let's get that out there. If you've got ARM templates, don't worry, you can still use them and carry on forever. But we realise that writing ARM templates is hard, right? And there's commas and there's speech marks and there's different parentheses you need to put in place, or brackets, and which one do I put where? And I think to a comment that we were having, a few weeks ago, where that people think it's a dev thing, right? Like, oh, I don't touch JSON, I'm an infra guy, I don't touch these dev things. It's like, what are you on about? And you're like, well, this is sort of why we built Bicep. We want to lower that entry barrier into infrastructure as code, so that you haven't got to worry about where a comma goes or where a speech mark goes. You just write what you want. And as you'll see as we go through this, it does look very much like Terraform. But it's because it works, right? It's a well-known language and people are familiar with it and like it. I'm not going to just reinvent something for the sake of it. So keep those in mind. Like, it's the question will get asked, I'm sure, tonight, and there'll be a prize if somebody asks the question.
Is this Azure way of kind of starting to move Terraform out of it?
It's very close to the question. You didn't want the prize.
I don't know how to word it because you've given me beer. But
So no, it's a good question, right? So what? Like, I think the question that a lot of people ask is why didn't we just buy HashiCorp? Why didn't we just buy Terraform? Right? And that's not the market we want to play in. Terraform is obviously a multi-cloud, and that's its key piece. If we buy that, it's very hard to protect that messaging and keep it as that. And we probably would have. Right? GitHub's been a really successful position in that fact, and people have carried on with it. But I think where you think in Terraform, they are very much their own business, right? They've got Sentinel, they've got all these other bits and pieces of the puzzle. It's not just Terraform. It's obviously very successful and made them what it is. But if you look at something like Oracle Cloud, for example, their infrastructure as code option is only Terraform. They haven't got their own language, right? So then you've got that relationship to handle, and there's all these pieces that go into it. So don't think we want to kill competition. And I think Terraform, back to the previous diagram, right? It has its external state file to be able to do all those multiple imperative put calls, and obviously it can go across cloud very quickly. Like you can, configure something in, try and think of like CloudFront, for example, and Azure at the same time in one set of Terraform plan applies. That's not something. This is an Azure native focused language. The other question has always been, well, Terraform lags behind in the Azure M provider, and how do we start to state that? Hopefully you've all seen, we're not talking about that tonight, but that AZ API provider that came out a month ago from us, which basically you can now deploy any resource, any feature, any property via Terraform to Azure from day zero, because it basically uses the bicep work that the engineering team have done for the RP declarations and API definitions as a Terraform provider. So you can now use a new provider called AZ API and deploy any resource, and you just have to write it in a JSON body in Terraform. So if that's always a question that your customers get, like, oh, Terraform lags behind, yeah, it doesn't anymore, done. So it's in preview, but it works really well. And then as support comes for it in the Azure M provider, we've got a tool that will help you migrate your state from the AZ API provider to the Azure M provider. So yeah, there's a really nice journey on that one. So yeah, top tip, check out the AZ API provider if you're in the Terraform space, because you'll be very impressed. But yeah, we're not in the game to buy HashiCorp again.
Now, I wouldn't imagine so. But I'm always in within the Azure space, is it don't use this? But it makes sense, if you're talking multi-cloud, why not use?
Yeah, and I think that's where it always comes down to, right? When I have a lot of Azure Landing Zones conversations, we have a Terraform module, and I've just finished writing all the Bicep modules for Azure Landing Zones. And which one do we use? And you're like, have you got existing skill sets in Terraform? Like, are you a big AWS or GCP house where you've already got those skills? Cool. Really easy adoption pathway. Go and use Terraform, carry on. You know all the stuff you have to be aware of, you know all the pitfalls, you know you've got to manage state, you know you've got all that stuff to look after yourself. Carry on, right? The barrier to entry is low for you. But if you're starting new and fresh to Microsoft and you're coming to Azure as a new customer and you haven't got a preference, Bicep's definitely a way to look at it, because you don't have to stay fast. Don't have any of those external dependencies to manage. You haven't got another third-party dependency for security to approve, right? One set of tooling. Microsoft natives always going to be supported by us. Always going to have all of those latest and greatest features delivered as fast as you can. Why wouldn't you? Right? It's the Azure native way.
But things like Bicep aren't supported for ABS. Services inside.
So this is where it starts to you peel back the layer cake, right? Because Azure is very much, Bicep and ARM are very much focused on the control plane. So everything you can declare from a resource provider and at that ARM level. When you're talking about, hey, I want to deploy inside of ABS now, I want to configure stuff inside of that, there's no API service in ARM for those things. Whereas Terraform might have a provider for VMware, for example, that can interact with that ABS cluster that's been deployed and go to that next level, right?
There's Azure Arc as well as doing VMware integration too. So
Yes.
you would use that, but I don't think Bicep can leverage Arc.
Well, no, it can, right? Because that's a really good point. So Azure Arc, you can install the ABS stuff in Azure Arc, and then you can create a VM using the Arc proxy agent, or whatever they call it, the Arc. I can't remember what it's called. But there's an Arc agent that basically connects it to the ARM control plane, and then you can do a VM creation and say, hey, deploy to this custom location, which is your ABS. Boom, off you go. So there are ways around it, and Arc is sort of the glue that's stitching all these things together now. But yeah, you're right. There are some times where Terraform will go the extra step, because it doesn't have to just be Azure native. It's got other providers for Palo Altos and VMware and Hyper-V. You can go that next level Whereas Azure is focused on that control management plane of Azure, and it won't go much further. You know, you use things like DSC and all those other things to do those other steps. But yeah, good question. So, ARM templates, right? So you're a developer or an IT pro, you write an ARM template, you hit AZ deployment create, it throws it to ARM, gets checked, hits the resource providers, get your stuff deployed. What do we do with Bicep? Well, we just put a layer in front of it, basically. So you now write a Bicep file. You can optionally run Bicep build, which will generate an ARM template for you. That's all it does, right? There is no hidden magic to Bicep. All it is a domain-specific language, DSL. It writes an ARM template for you. You just don't have to know how to write the ARM template. You write a nice, easy Bicep file, and you get an ARM template at the end of it, and you can deploy it. And you can even cut out this step, this Bicep build, because if you throw ARM via an AZ deployment create command, we'll do that for you on the back end and we'll convert it. So you can throw us a Bicep file, we'll compile it, and then deploy the resulting ARM template. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. So nothing really changes from a security standpoint, policy, RBAC, any of that stuff. We've not touched Azure at that stage. We've just given you another tool to be able to write ARM templates in a much easier way. And the IDE experience in Visual Studio Code is 1,000 times better, and like, it makes it so easy. And we'll see some of that later. Those of you who have written ARM templates, you're like, well, how do I get back? Like, what do I do the other way around, right? So we have this command called bicep decompile. By the way, all of these commands, if you're using the Azure CLI, you can just put AZ because we actually load bicep into the AZ CLI provider as well. So you can just do AZ bicep decompile and you can use the same commands. But bicep is an executable in its own right. If you want to install it like that, you can decompile an ARM template and spit out a bicep file. Is it perfect? No. Does it get you 80% of the way? Yes. Like, it's not going to know your custom naming formats that you want for your parameters and your variables and your style. Is it going to give you a functional template? Yes. Is it going to help you accelerate and get on that journey to go towards Bicep? Yes. And you know, that's what we're trying to say is there is no reason for people not to be writing Bicep files, right? If you want to write an ARM template, feel free, right? If you want to write 30 extra characters every time you want to deploy something, be my guest. I'm really not bothered. But Bicep is going to make your life easier, speed it up, and we've given you the tools to go the other way, right? So I think you'll see a lot more from us going forward that Bicep is going to be our hero motion for infrastructure as code. It's a lot easier, we lower the entry barrier, and we fix a lot of the problems that have been in ARM templates and the authoring experience in Bicep. So go and use Bicep instead. New stuff going forward, use Bicep, don't use ARM. Don't start ARM, start Bicep. And that'll be my suggestion going forward. So this is what an ARM template looks like, and this is deploying a single storage account and giving me its blob endpoint, so you know, like blob.cord or windows.net, right? Something I wrote earlier. As you can see, I've declared 3 parameters with some default values, so a name prefix, a location, the SKU, and I've got some allowed values to sort of control what can be inputted there. And then this is the resource deployment bit, right? And if we look down here, it's 43 lines of code, right? Just to deploy a storage account. And I don't even specify half the properties I can specify for a storage account, right? I've put in the bare minimum I need to deploy a storage account. Anybody want to guess how many lines that is in Bicep?
18.
Not quite 3, but that'll be good. 18. That's not a bad guess. Yeah, it's not a bad guess at all. All right, let's see what we've got. So, a Bicep file, 21 lines, right? And I could actually cut up the spaces in between, so your 18 is probably pretty close. But as you see, this is the exact same thing declared in Bicep. It looks very much like Terraform. It's got resource and symbolic names and API versions, right? You know, where you'd have like Azure underscore storage underscore account. You just got what you would have in the type. So where, if we look back at the old template, when I click on the right thing, we look back at this type, right? Microsoft storage account. It's on a separate property here. We're just wrapping that up in the declaration of resource now to make that easier, and the API version. But as you can see, I've got like easy things. I haven't got to put parameters, square brackets, and like I've got no commas anywhere. I've got no speech marks anywhere, right? I've got some standard string declarations where I need to for special characters, but you know, that's just some things. Look at the parameters at the top, right? The equals means default value. I haven't got to type default value and put all the gubbins around it. I literally just put equals. If I don't want to put a default value, don't put equals and don't put the string after it. It's that easy. And as you can see, like the allowed decorator, I can just type at allowed, and because it's above that parameter, it refers to that parameter. I haven't got to wrap it in a JSON object. I haven't got to do any of those things. And then look at this output, right? This is one of the big benefits of Bicep. if we look back at the output of the ARM template, look at what that's do, right? I'm calling the reference function, so I want to go and look something up. Right, now I need to tell it what name I need to go and look up, right? Use the same concatenated string that I want to do, which basically means text storage, then add the name prefix, then add a unique string based on the resource group name and its location, right? Which gives me a 13-character string back. I have to put all of that in, and then right at the end I go, just want the primary endpoints in the blog, thanks. That's all I want. If you look at this, I can use this symbolic name, right? I've got this symbolic name now, like Terraform, right? So I can literally just say, I'm referring to this resource, I don't want its properties, and I want those properties out of it. I haven't got to put in all of those complex functions anymore. When I compile that template, and we'll do this later, it'll write that for me. I've got to worry about or care about how it got there. It does it for me. And you can use these in dependencies. So when you want to start building your dependencies, like in Terraform, where you reference another resource, you haven't got to worry about this first and this first, because Terraform works that one out for you based on the symbolic names. Bicep does the same, surprise, surprise, because if I say, I deploy a VNet and I want to throw its logs back to this storage account, if I can just reference that in its declaration somewhere like stg.id, dependency built instantly, but I haven't got to declare it. It works out for me, right? So Bicep is very, very cool.
Linton's pretty good as well.
Linting is fantastic, right? Like all that highlighting that you saw on here, that's all built in from the VS Code extension. I haven't had to do anything there or configure anything. That's all from it as well, and you get IntelliSense all the way through, and we'll see that in the demos after a short break, like how easy this is to get going. Couple of goals, I think we come on to this a little bit earlier, like improved validation with better tooling, bingo. Lowering that barrier to entry. It's a transparent abstraction, so there's nothing we're hiding, it's just the same platform that you're used to. And it's modular, right? It's first-class code review, so you can, if you want to, it's all open source, it's all in C#. If you want to go and contribute to it, feel free, go on the Bicep repo. Way above my pay grade and my skill set, but some people in the room may be more inclined to that, and you can absolutely get on board. And what our non-goals are: one language to rule them all. Back to the Terraform conversation. We are not interested in that conversation. Like, we know what we do well. Let's stay in that. That's from me. And it's not a general purpose language to meet any need, right? So you're not going to be able to, start being able to use it to, build your web app or build a website or anything like that. It's very much focused on infrastructure as code, and that's where it's going to remain. There are there are actually some previews coming up where who's used Kubernetes in the room? Yeah? When you have to do like the deployment, you write the YAML files, and you have to deploy those to your cluster. There's actually a preview where you can go and download the nightly build and get this, where you can declare those YAML files in Bicep and deploy them to a Kubernetes cluster. So like adding a custom provider for sensible things. Another one that we're toying with as well that's well overdue is Azure Active Directory. So being able to create users, groups, managed service identity, managed service identity is a bit different, you can do that already. SPNs, like all of those things that you can't do today that you need PowerShell for, we're actually going to add to Bicep so that you can deploy those things. So watch this space. What's been going on? Like obviously since November 20, we released V1, and now we've moved to monthly releases. Although there was a bug, so we had 3 releases in May. But that's part of life, right? That's part of open source, right? We just release a new version, off you go. 0.74 came out yesterday. It should have been the end of May release, but it was a few weeks late. But we're now on a monthly release cycle, so you can expect to release every month with new features of what we've got ready at that point. No longer are we holding release until we finish the feature. Right? If it doesn't make it, cool, it makes it next month, and off we go. And you can check out all the releases on GitHub there. Right, I'm really conscious we're going to. People want some pizza. I need a break. So some like facts, right? Simpler, no JSON noise, right? First key advantage of Bicep. It's declarative, and we talked about at the beginning. It's modular, so you can now, who's used nested templates or like linked template deployments before? Cool, we've got this concept of modules now where you just literally type, instead of resource, you type module and point to the Bicep file, and we'll show you this later. And then we'll handle all that horrible stuff for you and inject it into your own templates. You haven't got to worry about storing it in a storage account and making it public, or putting it on a GitHub account and making it public. And obviously you can use template specs and all those other cool things as well if you want to. Built around VS Code, right? So VS Code is the best experience you get for it. We've just released the actual Visual Studio extension as well. So if you're a true dev, as I like to call it, you can now use it in Visual Studio as well. And we've given you the tools to convert existing ARM templates. No state files. So if you're starting out on that journey, you haven't got to worry about, hey, I've got to store state now. How do I do that securely? How do I back it up? All that stuff. Cool, don't have to worry about that. read the state directly from ARM. We've got it there, go and read it from it. You can deploy things like Azure Policy and all those other bits and pieces that you might not expect to deploy. It's not just about workflows, and we'll cover this later. Also with Bicep, so management groups, policies, subscriptions, all that stuff you can deploy with Bicep. 100% free, obviously, and open source. And this is a common question I get from my customers. It's like, yeah, but it's not supported. It's a 0. release, and you're like, yes. Since 0.3.1, fully supported by Microsoft support. So if you raise a support ticket about Bicep, they are going to support you as long as you're using the compiler that's newer than 0.3.1, which is like 2 years old. So pretty safe that you're probably using a new version. And there's this new really cool option as well in VS Code, where if you do like Control-Shift-E and get on the command palette, you can do insert resource, pass in the resource ID of an Azure resource, and it will write the Bicep file for you in your VS Code experience to help you like do that translation and get a bit more familiar with it. And also, use like the export template button in the portal. Bicep support is coming, don't worry guys, but this is like the stopgap for now, right? So use this as your stopgap for now, but it's coming. So I'll leave you with this, and then we get a bit of a break for some pizza and drinks, and feel free to ask questions in the break. I may say let's hold them and bring them back. But installing Bicep, aka.ms/install Bicep, literally, make sure you've got VS Code, put the Bicep extension in, and install Bicep in a number of different ways. And if you've got Azure CLI installed, already done for you. Happy days. So with that, grab some pizza, grab another drink, grab a refresh, and we'll be back in about, 15 minutes. So we've talked about what it is, why you should use it, and like, as with all these things, like I'll come and do the theory and then send you away and go and learn about these magical things, or we actually do it and like just show you how easy it is. So I'm going to grab a seat. Any of you who have got laptops and want to follow along, feel free. But yeah, I will start doing this a bit live. So what we're going to do here, something very simple. So don't worry about the subscription. I've already got one of those. And I'll even create a resource group another way because we'll get into changing scopes later. We just want to deploy a virtual network, a private DNS zone, whatever name we want. We'll call it, I don't know, Sussex Azure User Group or something like that, and a storage account, right, into an existing resource group, right? I should be able to write this in, I don't know, a couple of minutes, right? It's that easy to get going. So here's, let's get VS Code open. And that is sharing, that's fantastic. So is that big enough? Right, so first of all, we need to, let me zoom in one more level. So we need to, I've just got an empty folder and we just need to create a Bicep file, right? So we can call it anything. So I always use the example of Dave. Apologies to anybody called Dave. So Dave.bicep, right? And instantly you'll see we got that little like bicep symbol. Didn't explain this part. Bicep is a bad joke, yes. Like, it's called ARM. We then like, how do we make ARM better? Bicep. And that it stuck. It was that bad of a code name internally. We were like, we can't think of anything better. It stuck. We released it. It's now got a product, right? So yes, that is the real story behind why it's called Bicep. Need to install some updates. We'll ignore those. So I'm now in, right? And you may have seen across the bottom right-hand corner it was saying like loading the Bicep language server. If that crashes, which it very occasionally does, just close VS Code, reopen it. Happy days. Everything works. So we need to deploy the first thing, which was let's do a virtual network. So a couple of ways of doing this. If any time in VS Code you want to get IntelliSense to help you out, control and space, and you get all these magical things appear based on the extensions you've got. That's one way of doing it. Or we can say we've got these things called resource snippets. So if I do res hyphen inside of Bicep, there's loads of snippets already built in that you can add to and contribute to in the open repo as well. So if you go, hey, I've got a good example, upload it, put a PR in, they'll accept it as long as it's not doing something naughty. So if I do res hyphen vnet, look, boom. I haven't even got to worry about writing the thing, right? Like, it's giving me the bare bones very quickly. I could also author this in a different way, right? So if I go down here and type resource, and then I'd say, I don't know, let's just give it a symbolic name. Let's just call it VNet. Oh, by the way, don't use hyphens in Bicep. Hyphen is a bad character, and it's not supported by the language, basically. So you can use hyphens, you can use it in resource names and stuff like that, because you just have to wrap it in a string, but don't use it in symbolic names and stuff like that. It will just tell you it doesn't work. And then you can see I've instantly got all of these API versions appearing, right? So everything's here. Now, I don't have to type Microsoft.network, any of that. I can literally type virtual network, and it will start filtering these things, and I can just go, hey, yeah, I want that one. Perfect. Which API version do I want to use? It'll default to the latest that's available, and it'll query that. With the release, and they are looking to changing this so that it queries it live instead of it's tied to a release. If you're downloading an older version, you'd get a different list. So that we're looking at decoupling that. But yeah, as you see, 2021-08-01, so August last year. Fantastic. And now I can go space. It's got the concept of existing. So if you've got an existing resource, you just want to do a lookup of data from it. I can specify existing here and then specify its name, and it will do like a data pool. So if any of you use Terraform and you use data resources, existing is the same thing pretty much in Bicep. I just want to look data up from another resource and pull it in. That's how we do it. We want to create something new, so we hit equals, do space again, and boom, all right, required properties. Right? I don't even have to think about what I need here. So if I hit required properties, it's going to start spitting things out. So we've got a name, so we can just call this like VNet, for example, or Vent if you can't spell properly. And then boom, I haven't got any commas there or anything to do. What do I need now? Control space. Okay, well, I know I'm going to need a properties block. Okay, that's an object. It's like this. I'm just hitting space and going along here. What goes in the properties block? Control space. Oh, look, all of these things, right, with all of their documentation and what's needed. Is it a Boolean value? Is it all these things? Now, obviously, you can go along this and write this. Also, another top tip is if you're ever writing ARM templates, if you go to aka.ms/ARM template reference, ignore it says ARM template reference. If we look up virtual networks in here, that's going to take me to the ARC one because I always do that. Find it manually, right? So you can just go down the list. So networking, and then virtual networks. Right, as you can see here, we've got this flip field now with Bicep and JSON. So if I want the ARM version, I can hit that. I can see what the ARM version look like. If I want the Bicep, which it defaults to, you can see here. And this is basically the reference. So if you're wondering what is possible, this is every property you can ever specify for a virtual network in one place. You could copy this and fill it out. It won't work, but it gives you an idea of the schema and how it needs to look. Obviously, a virtual network is a complicated object. There's lots of things that go on here, and then when you get down, you can actually look into what these properties mean and what they take and all that stuff. But sorry, aka.ms/ARM template reference, all one word. So we're going to get rid of that because we've used a snippet, so we don't need to worry about using this. It's hovering over location. It's like you haven't given me location. Like I don't know what this is, right? IntelliSense is working for me already. It's giving me feedback that I'm missing something. So we could delete that and hard code that to something like UK South, right? And that will go away. And it's still going to give me a warning here that the lint is now kicking and saying you probably shouldn't hard code this value, right? It's not best practice to hard code these things. Why don't you consider making it a parameter instead, right? And actually, we've got a quick fix here for that. So I could say, all right, quick fix, create a new parameter called location with a default value. So, right, the VS Code experience is doing this all for me, right? It's helping me basically stay in line with some best practices. There's about 25 rules built in. Most of them have got quick fixes where you can do things like that. So very quickly, I've improved my template. It's swapped out the value to the parameter and written a location. And it's even been a very good and put a description in as well. I generally don't do those things. But, for reusing your code and giving them to other people, definitely worthwhile. So we've got our virtual network, happy days. We also needed a storage account. So let's just do res-stg. Oh, storage, perfect. There we go. Storage account. It's using that location property again, but say I deleted that, right? So if I'm now here and I do control space, you can see I've got this location field. So I can just know that that's a parameter. This means a resource, and you'll get used to these characters that you'll see next to it in VS Code. So I can say that's using a parameter now. So now I don't have to say parameters, brackets, speech marks, location. I can just say location, right? Because I'm using symbolic names. It knows what I'm on about. And then because, we've got some great IntelliSense support here, this is querying the Swagger documentation, so the API reference, to say what are the values that I can put in here? Like what are all the possible things that I can put in? So that if I put, I don't know, like Jack, for example, it would let me do that. And obviously it's not going to work. But, we're trying to make that as easy as possible. So when customers are doing this, IntelliSense is prompting you to which values are supported. So we'll just say, standard LRS, keep it cheap. Okay, we've got that. And now we need a private DNS zone. So I don't know if there is one for DNS zones. We'll have a look. DNS zone. happy days. And then we just give it a name. So this will be like, I don't know, SAUG.local. Let's just go that. DNS zones are a very easy resource to deploy. Not a lot to them, right? And that is it. We've written that architecture that we were talking around here very quickly, and declared it all. One thing we haven't done here is created that that pink line, and created that link between a virtual network and a DNS zone, so it allows that virtual network to query that DNS zone. So let's do that. So it's a child resource, and we've got a couple of ways we can declare that. I could declare a resource inside of here. So those of you used to ARM templates, you can declare resources inside of resources if they're childs, or you can declare them separately and reference them as parents and stuff like that. And it's always a bit complicated because however many slashes you have here, so if that was DNS zones and then we had like links, which will be, you'd then have to in the name put the name of the DNS zone, then the slash, and then so it knows how to basically route through the namespace. Well, we fixed that problem as well in Bicep because that was annoying. So if we declare like a virtual network link, so let's just do this quickly. Resource, VNet link, use camel casing, Jack, be good. So if we look up virtual network link, there we are. And this is going to kick off because that should have been a private DNS zone. 2 seconds. All right, rescued. API version, again, equals required properties. Okay, what do we need, right? Now, you can see what I was talking about here, right? We've got private DNS zones, which is a duplicate of the line above, but this is a child resource. We've got another resource nested inside of this block. So normally we'd have to basically, if we were to specify the name in the old school way, we would have to do saug.local / and then whatever we want the VNet link to be called, right? That's how we have to do it. Now, hard coding in a small template like this is, it's not okay. Use parameters, kids. Right, it's much, much safer. But if we want to be smarter about this and use some cool features in Bicep and, get the dependency graph to work for us, we've got this property called parent. So I can say parent, and now I can say, okay, what is my parent? Like, what is my parent of this resource? Well, oh look, the DNS zone, the symbolic name for that resource has appeared. Done. I haven't got to worry about that anymore, right? It now knows it's dependent on the resource above, so it will create that first. And it will handle the namespace routing for me, so I haven't got to worry about these things, right? And now I can specify a name and just say, I don't know, VNet link, for example. Happy days. No problems, integrated into the VS Code experience. So if I had problems here, like let's just say, I don't know, like IntelliSense and VS Code can tell me I've done things wrong. So instantly there. And if I save this now, I've got this nice button at the top here. Right, and this is called the visualizer. So for those of you who are worrying about, we need to do diagrams and we need stuff in our documentation, yeah, we got you covered as well. Built-in diagrammer. So we spit these out quite often in a lot of architectures we draw just to help you visualize how these resources are stitched together. So you can see there's a dependency there by that line. The rest are not, so they'll be deployed in parallel. Right, very quick to get going. Right, we've deployed something fairly complex there in terms of the DNS zone and a virtual network link, which could take you some time normally, pretty much just by using snippets. Half of those resources I didn't even write, I just used snippets that were built in. And that's the pleasure of Bicep, right? These are the things we've tried to really make better and improve. Now, we've got this file, we might as well try and deploy it. So I'm already logged into a set of Azure subscriptions. And if I just go, let's just have a look what I've got. I've probably got a few, just make sure I'm logged in. Yep. Oh, and by the way, if you like the theme of my terminal and you use Oh My Posh, this theme is available for you on the repo. So just look up JTracy93, you'll find the theme. You can download it. It's got a Spotify integration and everything. Superb. Check it out. Like play a Spotify song, it appears in your terminal browser. It's great. It's great. So let's just see if we've got any resource groups. So get AZ resource. I always do that. Group. I don't think I've got anything in here because I think I've tidied it up. No, I have got some stuff in here, doing some testing obviously. Let's just create a new resource group. And we could declare this via Bicep and we'll come on to that later. Let's just say name and let's just call this, I don't know, SAUG test and give it a location of UK South. If I type. Right, we've got a, what did I do there? Oh, I did do that. That's better. Okay, we've got a resource group called SAUG test, and if I just do a very quick ls, you can see that Dave Bicep file here, right? So if I do new AZ resource group deployment, and then I say template file, and then I can say dave.bicep, right? I haven't got to convert that to a bicep file. That's a good point though, before we go any further. Let's just go and have a look at what we can do. So if we right click on that Dave Bicep file, we can do build bicep file. And that's effectively just run bicep build for me. I haven't just typed it in the CLI, right? But now you see it's got this dave.json file. Well, we have an ARM template file that is generated for me, right? So you'll always see this metadata block that will tell us some information so that we know how it's been created. But you can see all of the things that we would have had to have done in an ARM template have been automatically generated for me, right? So how many lines we got here? 73 lines versus 48. So big saving on the amount of typing you're having to do as a developer. And as you can see, like, look at this horrible resource ID function that I've had to write for the depends on. Well, I haven't declared dependency. I've just said its parent was the DNS zone. Like, that's all I said. I didn't know the dependency. It's worked that out for me. It's declared that for me. So some really, really nice things to stop you basically hurting yourself as you're trying to deploy stuff into Azure. Because ARM templates did make you hurt yourself sometimes because you just kept bumping into these walls. Right? You kept going, oh, why doesn't that work now? And then you get a different API message. Go back and try it again. Oh no, I'm missing this property, right? Bicep's built to fix all of these problems. So we've got this JSON file. I'm going to delete it to prove there's no magic. And if we open up the terminal again, and you can see my ARM extension is trying to load, that will take a little while. So template file, dave.bicep, and I don't think there was any parameters in here that we need to specify, right? It's going to deploy to UK South. I just need to tell the resource group to deploy to. So I think I called it SAUG test. And that's it. Like, I haven't got to do anything. I'm scoping this at the resource group level, which is sort of the default level. Inside a bicep template, and there you go, I've got something wrong. What have I done? Pre-hot validation, oh, the storage account name is already taken because it's a very basic storage account name, I expect. What's its name? Yeah, I'd imagine there is a storage account called name somewhere in the world. So let's make that a little bit more unique, shall we? So this is where we can use some clever functions. So if I put the $, that means I want to interpolate a string. Some developers will definitely know that in the room. But for those of you who are IT pros, you may not. You see it's gone orange now, right? So it's not treating this as a string as green anymore. So I can now start using functions. So all of these purple things are ARM functions that are built in. Let's just use the unique string function, which basically gives you a 13-digit random string based on some things you pass into it. And you can pass in as many arguments as you want to this. So let's pass in another function called resource group, which basically looks at the resource group you're deploying to. I could specify its name in here, but I don't need to. If I leave it blank, it just uses the one I'm deploying to. And then I'll say, I don't know, use its name. And I don't know, let's use the location as well to make it random. And then outside of these curly brackets, if I do this, I'll say, don't add a hyphen to your storage account, it's not supported. Let's add some other things. Let's call it SAUG and then, I don't know, 001, for example, right? So that should be fairly unique now. We can hit the up arrow and try again, and hopefully this time we won't get a lovely error message saying it's already taken. And obviously it's deploying other things at the same time here, so we can get that virtual network. We're going to get that virtual network link, and whilst it's doing that, I should probably log into the Azure portal to prove it actually works. See. SAP, don't go and try and buy this domain name like you normally try and do when mine expire.
Taking a screenshot.
This is going to be fun because it's going to send an authentication prompt to my phone. When I can type my password correctly. I can't get to the phone right now. That's going to be fun.
Send the text and I'll read out the code.
Thank you, mate. Security people at its finest. I'll tell you what, I'll send it. Oh yeah, that's true. Always fun.
That's right, we'll edit all this bit out, yeah.
No, you include like you walking over.
It's still recording video, so.
Let's take a quick selfie, right? We're going to do this. Okay. Okay, yeah, send another request. Thank you. Approve. Happy days.
I feel like Debbie McGee.
I don't know who that is.
Magician's assistant.
All right.
There we go.
So we are in. Let me zoom in. So we have our horrifically named resource group that we'll delete in a minute. But we also have our SAUG test resource group, right? And if we go back to VS Code, we can see it's finished. It failed on one of the things because we didn't specify a location, which was called
Storage account.
my storage account. Did I? No, I had a location there. What did it fail on? We'll have a look. And as you can see, the error messages from the ARM are still not horrifically helpful. But as you can see, we've got what we wanted. So we've got a storage account, we've got a VNet, and we've got a DNS zone. If we look at deployments, this is just an ARM deployment, right? So we can see my deployment name was called Dave because it uses the name of the bicep file by default. I can override that as a parameter. I can override that when I do the CLI. And if we look here, it's the VNet link. So I'm missing something on the VNet link, which is this one, and if I do that, it's probably going to tell me that the location is a required property, and let's just put in location. And the pleasure with ARM, it's incremental by default, so I can override at the top. It's not going to delete anything, it's not going to change anything, it's just going to make it look like an add to it on top. It's not going to delete stuff. So we can rerun that. It's going to edit that deployment, so if we go back here and look at those deployments and do a refresh, there you go, it's deploying. Right, it just overwrites the name, but I would highly recommend you add like a UTC or like a time look up in there so that you keep your resource deployment history. You can keep 800 of these by default, and when you hit the 800th, we now automatically start clearing out the old ones for you. You can opt out of that feature if you want to, but most people by that stage have forgotten about it. So yeah, you can leave that there. Hopefully this now deploys and is... No, it doesn't. What doesn't it not like? The subscription... Oh, there you go. This subscription isn't registered for virtual network links, so I need to register for the resource provider because I haven't deployed that in this account. However, you get the idea, right? It's deployed what we want it to, and as you know, we've got this random string, we've got the SAUG AA1 at the end, my VNet's called name, which is handy. Luckily that doesn't have to be globally unique, and it's got the subnets we declared or didn't declare in there, so everything's deployed as code. It's all there, happy for us to use, and it was fairly painless to write, you know. So, how do people feel about that author experience, right? Very easy, like, we tried to write that same in ARM template, we'd still probably be trying to write the ARM template or working out where we missed a comma somewhere. You know, that's the benefit of this. So, I think that's important to try. Did anybody try along? I know I see a few laptops, I see a Surface Go as well. I would love to know how that's going on the Surface Go.
Perfect.
Yeah? Good stuff. Must be a 3. But even Ryan shot. Me and Ryan both had Surface Go ones, and it was like the slowest thing I ever owned in my life. But yeah.
There's not a lot of it other than partial.
But yeah, you know, this is very easy to get going, right? So what I would encourage you, especially those of you who are newer to maybe the development side, like, you know, this should be bread and butter for you guys. You look at this and go, God, this is not a language. Like, you haven't seen anything like this. For those of you on the IT pro side, like where I've come from, and I'm certainly, you know, Ryan as well, it's lowering that entry barrier again, right? There is no reason why you can't do infrastructure as code now, right? Think of it as a selling point to your customers when you're going, yeah, we'll declare it, we'll give you a load of, you know, give you a repo with all your code in, and, you know, everything's declared as infrastructure as code, and you can redeploy it and change the parameters and, you know, start getting those benefits from infrastructure as code, instead of selling days and days and days of effort of, I'll go in the portal for you and I'll click this button and I'll do this and create and create and create. And then you can build your internal inner sourcing approach where you have maybe a set of templates that are broken up that you know work. Like you have a VNet template that's your template, and you have a VM template that works. And then you can just start passing in the parameters, change the parameters files, and off you go, right? You know it's going to work every time, rinse and repeat, throw it through a pipeline, and your maybe 10 days of professional services effort goes down to 3 days because all you're doing is changing the parameter files and testing it done what you said you don't want to do. That's the benefit to the infrastructure as code, and Bicep really helping you, accelerate that and get there as fast as possible. I think we talked about this feature earlier, so I'm just going to create a new Bicep file. I'm just call it main.bicep. If I do Control Shift, let's go into the Azure portal first. Let's go and get that storage account, right? So I want to get its resource ID. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You can go to Properties, or if you hit this JSON view button at the top, you'll see all the JSON, and that's a deployable ARM template, by the way. You can copy that. Let's copy this resource ID at the top, and let's go back to VS Code. We'll do Control Shift P and do Insert Resource. You can see I've got Bicep Insert Resource at the top. Hit Enter, and it's now like, cool. Which file do you want me to put this in? It's aware I've got multiple files in that directory. Main, and what's the resource ID? That one. You obviously need to be authenticated in your CLI to do this, but there you go. It's just written Bicep for me. Now, obviously, I've got all of these other properties that I didn't declare, right? I only declared like the bare minimum. You can still tidy this up, right? Not all of these are required. It's giving you everything because that resource is represented. But if you're trying to work out, like, I don't know how that resource is declared, and I don't want to read the ARM template reference, I don't want to work it out myself, that's another great way to get started with infrastructure as code. Deploy it in the portal, something you're comfortable and familiar with, hit Insert Resource, and boom, here it is. And now you can start tailoring this. So like, okay, I don't want the kind, location. It's already calling out saying, hey, that should be a parameter. Boom, all right. We're starting to improve this template as we go. Save this, make it reusable, use it again. So yeah, again, trying to get as many people using infrastructure as code as possible. Now, we have got another lab, and I'll leave that on the screen. I think there's a bit of a challenge, and I'd love people to go and give this a go if you're thinking of ideas. I know I struggle when doing demos and labs, like I don't know what to go and try. This is a good challenge for you to go and have a stab at, but I'm not going to go through that now in the interest of time. I think we can get through some other bits and have a bit of a chat. So I'll go back to some slides. I'll stand up and stop being lazy. If any of you are interested, we can go through that at the end, and I'll happily take people through if they're interested. So, has anybody heard of something called CARML, or the Common Azure Resource Module Library? Cool, good to see that our marketing's working well. Something I've been working on actually I've been contributing to. That's not fair. I haven't been really working on this. I've been giving my feedback on this project. This is written by Microsoft Consulting Services, our professional services part of Microsoft, now known as ISD, Industry Solution Delivery, something like that. I can't really remember. ISD is the internal acronym now for them, or MCS, as everybody still refers to them as. They've basically, over their time of consulting, they've obviously written a number of ARM templates, right? Hundreds and thousands, pretty much every resource, and built in flexibility and the secure defaults and all the things you want to do. We've now been working with them to make this sort of open source, right? But actually not publishing it as ARM templates, publishing it as Bicep templates. So there are a number, I think there's 90 odd resources today declared as Bicep modules that you can go and steal, basically. That we've written all these code, you can pass in the parameters, all super flexible already. And you can use these as Lego blocks, right, to start stitching together a big architecture. So if you don't want to have to worry about specifying everything manually yourself or writing it from scratch, you can go and take CARML, and yeah, we all do call it caramel internally. There was a big conversation about what do we call it, but yeah, that's what we ended up on. You can take this, clone it into yours, download the repo, and then just start referencing those modules either in pipelines or start building your own Bicep orchestration files and saying module this, module that, and I'll show you how we can do that in a second. They're all tested. They're all before we publish them. They go through actual resource deployment tests, and we clean it up and make sure they're valid. We make sure the linter checks pass, all of those things. We've got guidance on how to set these up with GitHub and Azure DevOps, and how to basically build your own inner sourcing house following our model and using the test framework that's built there. So yeah, really, really good. I think this target user is important to note, right? This is not built for beginners. This is not built for people who are completely new to infrastructure as code or never seen Azure, because you'll look at this and be like, oh, it's a JSON parameters file, that looks complicated, right? JSON parameters file, I think it's me and Nick were talking around at the beginning. That is something that Bicep team are working on today. So if you're used to ARM templates and declaring JSON parameter files, you still have to declare JSON parameter files for Bicep today. Big ask, like issue number like 150, like really early. We're now issue like 1,000 something. It's being worked on. I was speaking to the product team last week. and they are actively looking at this, and they shared this on the community call that I know I've spoken to some of you in the room about. So they're looking to fix this so you can declare your parameter inputs in a bicep style as well. Watch this space, some very cool things they're talking around. So it's being worked on, but for now you have to declare your parameters as JSON files, or at the time of the CLI input, you basically specify the parameter name. But you need to be basically like level 200, 300 in Azure, and be willing to bang your head a few times to learn how this language is used in the way that it's been written in these Carmel modules. But once you've got the knack of how Carmel's been authored, you can stitch these things together super quickly. Like, any of you deploying AVD in the room, I think I was talking to Unique earlier about AVD. The AVD accelerator that we've recently built from Microsoft and published a couple of weeks ago is all built using Carmel modules. So you can see how we've used it internally, because we don't want to be writing our own code a million times. I would just go and reuse somebody else's work and make it pass in the parameter we want. A couple of things to call out. It's still an MVP, right? So it's still early days, still going to be changes, but download the latest release and it's not going to change. You can stay pinned to that. And if any of you are using Azure Landing Zones Bicep, we are not using Carmel for that yet, because we're aimed at different target audiences. We're aimed at much more newer to Azure people, because we're helping them get going on their platform. So we don't want to add this complexity in just yet, but just a couple of things to point out. Talking of Azure Landing Zones, the thing that I do for my day job, like, Bicep is not just for resource workloads, right? It's not just for deploying things inside of resource groups and subscriptions. If you want to start building out this entire architecture that it's burnt into my brain, and I see when I go to sleep, about how do you set up your Azure enterprise to get going from the start, you can now use ALZ Bicep, which, as you can see, I've done an awful lot of contributions to and look after with the rest of the team. All of these are declared as Bicep modules. So if you want to start saying, hey, we want the management group structure, cool, as a module for that, just passing the parameters. Or we want all the policies that you do in ALZ Bicep as a module for that. We want the hub networking module for that, right? You can just literally follow the deployment flow through, and in about an hour, you can have this whole architecture deployed with the modules that we use and stay up to date with what we do. Talking of Azure Landing Zones a little bit further, we have 3 options. So if you do want a portal experience to get that same architecture, aka.ms/ALZ, there's a portal experience where you just click on it, fill in a form, quite a lengthy form, probably like 6 tabs, can't remember how many it is now, but you can basically like radio buttons, yes, no, I want this, I don't want this, and you'll get that architecture. If you want to start on that infrastructure as code journey, you obviously got ALZ Bicep, which we just mentioned, and we also have a Terraform module as well, which people in my team order as well. You can go and use that. Obviously, going to Terraform once you've not started with Terraform is pretty difficult, so make that decision early, because you have to import everything into the state file, and that takes some time. So if you do want to think about starting with Terraform, make that decision before you deploy it. Otherwise, you're better off probably redeploying it and starting again. Just as a heads up, just the way Terraform works. So wrapping this up, hopefully you've all got the idea that it's simpler syntax and there's no JSON noise, right? It's the 2 things to take away from Bicep. It's so easy. This is a Cosmos DB account and a SQL DB inside of that Cosmos DB declared in ARM. That's the same thing declared in Bicep, right? It speaks for itself. I think another example is the policies.json file inside an enterprise scale. It's 16,000 lines of JSON. It's the pain of my life. In Bicep, 1,200 lines. Like, massive reduction, right? I can actually read it and it actually loads in VS Code, right? In GitHub, if you open up the policies.json file, it gives you like, this is too big. You sure you want to open this? Because like your browser's going to struggle. And you click on it and then your browser crashes. I don't have that with Bicep because it's such a reduction of code and using some cool features like loading files in as content and stuff like that, where it's just not available in ARM templates. There's this really useful link. I think if you go to aka.ms/bicep playground, this is a web experience. You can literally write Bicep on the left and it will spit out the ARM and vice versa. So if you just want a quick play with it and not have anything installed, there's like a web app you can play with. And if you are, I know we were talking, Pat, about your big user of ARM templates, we've got this document that says these are the syntax compared. So like if you're used to doing this in ARM, this is how you do it in Bicep, and just giving you sort of the heads up on the language changes. If you've not learned everything, hopefully, that we've whistled through tonight, there is an amazing Microsoft Learn. Who's used Microsoft Learn? Please tell me everybody's used Microsoft Learn. Fantastic, right? There is 3 modules on learning paths in ALZ Bicep for Bicep. which takes you from the very fundamentals of doing things that we've done tonight, like deploying a storage account, using parameters, all those sort of things, all the way through to advanced Bicep, which is like, how do I do it with Azure DevOps pipelines? How do I inject variables and parameters? How do I build module nesting and dependencies? How do I use template specs? All of those conversations, all in learning modules, right? It's really, really good. This is the way that when it first came out, I went through this and basically upskilled. Go and use it. It's completely free. Like, there is no reason not to. And so I was discussing with somebody in the break about the community calls. So if you're interested about what's going on in Bicep and what's next and what's coming, the product group are fantastic, right? So follow them on Twitter @BicepLang. They're really active and really, really good to reach out to and ask any questions, or use the GitHub issues as well, because they're really responsive on those. But they also run these monthly community calls. They run at different time zones every month to accommodate, obviously, the globe. So sometimes it's like 5 PM, sometimes it's like at 9 PM, sometimes it's really early in the morning. But they're always on YouTube within about a week. So if you do miss them, you can always catch up. And you will find out, like, as a Microsoft employee, I know as much as you do, because they share everything on these community calls. There is nothing that is hidden. There is nothing. It is a true open source effort, and I love this about this project. You know, anything that I know, you will find out on these calls. Like, half the things that I'm talking about, like the AAD stuff and the Kubernetes stuff, they announced that months ago. Like, it's all public knowledge, and they want people to feed back. So, like, when I was saying I was chatting with the product group around parameter files for Bicep, they were asking for people on the last call saying, fill out this form, we'll get in touch, we'll schedule calls with you, we'll want your feedback, right? They really want it to be a community-driven effort. So get involved, join these calls, like an hour, watch them when you've got 5 minutes or an hour of time, skip through them. Like, very, very valuable, and, you know, highly recommend. Also, this channel has the policy management groups, resource graph, and all that stuff. So they do a quarterly call. So well worth watching that one as well if you get a chance. But yeah, that's it for Bicep. Pleasant reminder, like, obviously I've done all the talking tonight, and hopefully you've got us a lot of value from this. Obviously, when we come back, I think we're talking September, right? You know, I'm away on holiday in August. You know, people will be breaking for summer now and disappearing. So September we'll probably get back together, and we would really love for somebody or a couple of people, right? If you don't want to be talking, like, doesn't matter, like, I've talked for nearly an hour or two tonight, right? If you've got 20 minutes or you've got half an hour, we want you to come and present, right? We want you to get involved and feel like it's your place. So, but if you've got a cool story, obviously anonymized customer data if you can't share it and all that sort of stuff, you know, but, you know, just say, you know, Acme Corporation or whatever. But, you know, come and present it. We want to hear, we want you guys to feel like this is your user group as well as ours, right? We're just the people who turn up, get the pizzas, get the beers, and give you the platform to present. So yeah, whatever it is, we've had talks on Kubernetes before, we've had talks on Kida and all those sort of things, you know, very app dev focused. We've had April come and do sort of live hacks before, you know, let us know. And even if you don't want to present, let us know what you want to see, right? Again,
it doesn't have to be like Azure specific stuff, things that run on Azure. So we've done things on like NetApp files,
yep,
or you know, Palo Alto NVAs running on Azure, why they're better than other things. So just food for thought, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us some ideas and make sure you come along. Obviously, if you love hearing the sound of mine and Ryan's voice, you've got 28 episodes of the podcast to go and listen to, so enjoy. And also, you can go and check these out on YouTube. So if you want to go through anything again we've spoken about tonight, feel free to go and check this out when we've got it up there. And lastly, like, thank you, right? Like, thank you for turning up. It's always a risky thing. I think me and Ryan have been putting off for a little while, thinking, like, oh, are people going to come back? Are people going to get here? We want to hear feedback, right? This helps me and Ryan, you know, shape the user group, do more things with it. So, you know, feel free to scan the QR code or go to the short link, sussexazure.uk/June22 review, not very short. And, you know, if you want to check us out on any of the links, then feel free to find any of those bits and pieces. But yeah, that's it, guys. Like, we'll break, finish up the rest of the pizza, otherwise I'm going to get very fat very quickly. And there's more beers and drinks, so yeah, knock yourselves out and stick around as long as you like, and we'll keep the conversation going. But thanks all.
Awesome. Thank you, Jack.